100 बार मैं तुम पे वारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। दो जल्दी से दूल्हा बनाओ, लो जल्दी से दूल्हा बनाओ, तेरी बारात को मैं सजाऊं। घर में बैठी है दुल्हन बेचारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। रोके ख़ैमे में ज़ैनब पुकारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। रंग मेहंदी का गहरा रचा है, रंग मेहंदी का गहरा रचा है, हाथ में देखो कंगन बंधा है। बात सुन लो जरा तुम हमारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। रोके ख़ैमे में ज़ैनब पुकारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। ये बता दो कहाँ जा रहे हो, ये बता दो कहाँ जा रहे हो, किस लिए दिल को तड़पा रहे हो। लो फूलो फूलो तुम सवारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। रोके ज़ैमे में ज़ैनब पुकारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। आज माजी दिखाने का दिन है, आज माजी दिखाने का दिन है, तुमको दूल्हा बनाने का दिन है। बीबियाँ राह तकती है सारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। रोके ख़ैमे में ज़ैनब पुकारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। बीबियाँ याद करती है तुमको, बीबियाँ याद करती है तुमको, अपनी सूरत तो दिखला दो हमको। कह रहा है कोई गम की मारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। रोके ख़ैमे में ज़ैनब पुकारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। हूरो गिल्मा भी आए हुए हैं, हूरो गिल्मा भी आए हुए हैं, बादब सर झुकाए हुए हैं। किसने गर्दन है तेरी उतारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। रोके ख़ैमे में ज़ैनब पुकारी, आज मेहंदी है कासिम तुम्हारी। जाऊं 100 बार मैं तुम
सवाल।
पामाल लाशा देख के कहती हैं बीबियाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। पामाल लाशा देख के कहती हैं बीबियाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। टुकड़े पुकारे दश्त में लब्बैका या हुसैन, टुकड़े पुकारे दश्त में लब्बैका या हुसैन, आकर कहा जो मौला ने कासिम हो तुम कहाँ, आकर कहा जो मौला ने कासिम हो तुम कहाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। पामाल जीते जी जो हुआ है उसे सलाम, पामाल जीते जी जो हुआ है उसे सलाम। रोकर लहू ये कहते हैं खुद साहिब ज़मान, रोकर लहू ये कहते हैं खुद साहिब ज़मान, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। आ जाओ मेरे भाई तलक बोले या हसन, आ जाओ मेरे भाई तलक बोले या हसन, कासिम न लो हुसैन की गुर्बत का इम्तहान, कासिम न लो हुसैन की गुर्बत का इम्तहान, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। ये कह के कुछ निशानों को शह चूमने लगे, ये कह के कुछ निशानों को शह चूमने लगे, अब्बास देखो रगड़ी हैं कासिम ने एड़ियाँ, अब्बास देखो रगड़ी हैं कासिम ने एड़ियाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। टुकड़े उठाने लाश के सरवर के साथ साथ, टुकड़े उठाने लाश के सरवर के साथ साथ, ज़हरा गई है दश्त में जाने कहाँ कहाँ, ज़हरा गई है दश्त में जाने कहाँ कहाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। पामाल हो न लाश चचा की ये सोच कर, पामाल हो न लाश चचा की ये सोच कर, लिपटा हुआ सुबह से है फरवा का नौजवान, लिपटा हुआ सुबह से है फरवा का नौजवान। ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। मादर करेगी किस तरह दीदार आखिरी, मादर करेगी किस तरह दीदार आखिरी। हाय सुमो के चांद से चेहरे पे हैं निशान, हाय सुमो के चांद से चेहरे पे हैं निशान। ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। लगता है मुझको मीर तकल्लुम क़याम से अब भी सुनाई देती हैं फरवा की हिचकियाँ, अब भी सुनाई देती हैं फरवा की हिचकियाँ। ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ, ज़हरा की तरह टूटी हैं कासिम की पसलियाँ। सलावत।
Before we start the lecture, I have just a couple of announcements. Please make sure that you pick up the membership forms from the back counter there, fill them out and return them to one of us, one of the trustees or one of Dr. Waqar Gardezi or myself. Also, we have a financial report disclosure for everybody today, and we'll do that presentation for about 3 minutes, just a couple of slides, and we'll do that between Maulana's speech and Matam. So please stay seated after Maulana finishes his speech for a few minutes. And with that, I'll invite Maulana to deliver his 7th lecture of the series. Wa Muhammad wa ale Muhammad salawat.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله وسلم عليك يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأن المساجد لله فلا تدع مع الله أحدا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. chapter 72, verse 18, describes the exclusivity of the masajid to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Surah Al-Jinn, He says, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. That surely or verily the masajid belong to Allah, so do not associate anyone with Allah, meaning in that which belongs to Him. And commentators have told us that the term masajid here is a plural of either the word masjid or masjid. And those are two different things. The masjid can refer to either the place where sujood is performed, meaning the home or the building or the area where sujood is performed, where prayer takes place. And this is why we refer to our house of worship, our house of congregational worship, as the masjid, because that is where it is performed. Another meaning of the word masjid is that which the sujood is performed upon. So another one of those meanings is the body parts that the sujood is performed upon, which are 7, al-masajid al-sab'a, the forehead, the palms of the 2 hands, the knees, and the tips of the toes on both feet. And we are told in the narration that one day our 9th Imam, Al-Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam, he was in a gathering, a forum, which was organized by the caliph at the time. And the caliph at the time would intentionally organize these forums and pose challenges and ask questions to the imam in front of the various scholars, in front of the various justices at the time. And he would make sure that the Chief Justice was always present. The intention behind that was to stump the imam. And so the question was asked in that forum that if a person has, if a person is convicted as a thief, that what is the punishment? That where do we cut this person's hand off or their arm off? And so there were various opinions that were tossed around. One person said, well, from just below the elbow, another person just between the elbow and the shoulder. Another person said, well, from the elbow. Another person said the palm. Another person said the fingers. And we are told that Al-Imam al-Jawad, it describes in the narration, that he refuted all of their opinions using this verse, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا, that the masajid belong to Allah. So what you say should be amputated belongs to God, and so it is not the decision of man, no matter what happens, to take that away. So the verse tells us that the masajid, whether it be the place of prostration on the body, or whether it be the house of worship, the communal house of worship or congregational worship, belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason I bring this up is because we need to remind ourselves every so often of the role of the place of gathering. How do we keep that exclusivity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we make sure that culture does not get in the way of worship? How do we make sure that ego does not get in the way of the purpose that is intended by the gathering at the communal house of worship? And in a way, we can think about it in the following terms, that one thing that we should pay attention to and we should strive towards is liberating our houses of worship from the cultural and social norms that we engage in that are incorrect. And the reason I say incorrect is because sometimes we have cultural or social norms that we introduce into the house of worship, and there's nothing wrong with it. When we talk about culture versus religion, sometimes people take it to mean that one or the other, they're mutually antagonistic. So it's either culture or either religion, and that's not necessarily the case. There are cultural practices that are brought into the house of worship that are acceptable. Some of them are not acceptable. And so we need to be able to distinguish between the two. We need to be able to pursue liberating our houses of worship from those cultural norms or those social norms which are not correct. Imam Hussein alayhi salam teaches us a valuable lesson in this regard. He says the following, and this came in the form of an admonishment that he gave to the army of Umar ibn Sa'd. In one of the many sermons, because we know that Imam Hussein alayhi salam, yes, before he arrived to Karbala, he clarified what his intentions were. But even when he arrived and when he saw the enemy, he wanted to make sure that every single person, whether on his side or whether you're on the other side, they were clear of the intentions and what was going to happen. And so the Imam, we are told the night before Ashura, he clarifies his intentions to his family members and companions, the ones that were with him. And he gave them the choice of either leaving or not. And the ones that had stayed until the night of Ashura chose to stick to it to the end. Nobody abandoned. Well, he also made his intentions clear to the enemy, because up until that day, there were still people that were arriving from Kufa. When most of the people who stood against Imam Hussein alayhi salam, a lot of them were there for opportunity. A lot of them were there, they were hired as mercenaries. So when they began to hear about the bounty and the reward that was waiting for them, their numbers would increase. So every single day, up until the day of Ashura, the numbers were increasing day by day. So the Imam wanted to make sure that he spoke in a way that it was clear to the people what his intentions were. And so one of the messages that he delivers, he says, "O followers of Abu Sufyan, or the family of Abu Sufyan." And he uses, what's particular is he uses the word Shia, which means the partisans or the followers. He says, "Ya Shi'at al-Abi Sufyan." He refers to them as the Shia of the family of Abu Sufyan. He says to them, "In kuntum la takhafun Allah." He says that if it's not the case that you fear God, if you do not fear God, then at least kunu ahraran fi dunyakum. At least be free. Be liberated. Now, what did that mean? When we talk about freedom and when we talk about liberation, the first thing that we think about is freedom of choice. We talk about freedom of speech. We talk about the freedom to bear arms. We talk about the freedom to criticize. But freedom that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was talking about was on a deeper level, because a lot of them, in those terms, they were free. They were free to either be there or not be there. But he was talking about an even deeper level of freedom. And that is freedom from the material, not just the material possessions, but the material seductions of this world. Because if you look at liberty, if you measure liberty and you measure freedom, there's different levels. The highest form of liberty, the highest form of freedom is personal freedom. Meaning that when you're able to be free and liberated from the things that hold you down as an individual, the things that hold you back as an individual. So it's not necessarily freedom of speech or freedom of expression, because a lot of that is external, but more of the internal things which hold us back. And so drawing a parallel between that and proposing that our houses of worship and our places of communal gathering should be free and liberated, I want to present to you something that I read recently. And these are principles that have to do with personal freedom and personal liberation. There's an author who wrote a book, and this book is based on, he says, is based on an ancient wisdom. And just as a preface, by the way, you know, it's very interesting. Once you begin to venture outside and read and gather information, you find that a lot of inspirational material, a lot of educational materials, a lot of leadership materials that are out there. Sometimes, I come across these materials and I wonder if these authors, how familiar they are with Islamic concepts, because sometimes it's as if they're speaking directly from the Quran or the Hadith. And it makes me think that sometimes as Muslims, we're not familiar with our own concepts, and other people are more familiar with our concepts. So as I read this, you'll find that a lot of these parallels can be drawn within Islamic leadership principles, Islamic ethics, and Islamic behaviors. So he talks about 4 personal freedom and personal liberation principles. And again, this goes back to the saying of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, "Kunu ahraran fi dunyakum." So Imam Hussein's message to those people was, whatever lifestyle choice you have taken, that's up to you. But the point that he wanted to deliver was, be free when it comes to the materials of this world. Be free when it comes to the shackles of this world. It's such an interesting concept to understand, because Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, he said the following. In Nahj al-Balagha, when he describes a group of people, not the enemy that stood against him, but there was a particular group of people that kind of remained on the fence. They didn't know whether to support him or whether to turn against him or to pledge allegiance to his enemies. One of the people whose name is well known in history, he was kind of a flip-flop. Some days he would be here and some days he would be there. And he was asked about that behavior and attitude, and he says, there's nothing like praying with Ali, but there's nothing like eating with Muawiyah. So, he kind of wanted the best of both worlds, and he was on the fence. And so when it came, even during the life of the Prophet, during the life of Al-Imam al-Hassan, during the life of Al-Imam al-Hussein, you had people that were on the fence. And it's interesting because Amir al-Mu'mineen, he talks about those people. He says, خَذَلُوا الْحَقِّ وَلَمْ يَنْصُرُوا الْبَاطِلِ. He says that they let down, literally, خَذَلُوا الْحَقِّ, meaning they let down the truth. They let down the principle of truth. وَلَمْ يَنْصُرُوا الْبَاطِلِ. And they didn't go the opposite way. I mean, what he was saying was, they let go of the truth, but they were useless to evil as well. Even the other forces had no use for them because they were on the fence, because their position was not known. And many times in life, in many issues, we're on the fence, and we wonder why people don't trust our judgments and people don't follow us. It's because we sometimes have difficulty in making decisions, and part of leadership is being able to make a decision and follow through with the consequences. Now, that doesn't mean that you're always going to make the right decision. Sometimes you'll make the wrong decision, but at least standing for something instead of standing for nothing. It's said that there was one of the sons of the prominent companions that chose not to stand with the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. One day, he meets Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi. And we know about Al-Hajjaj. Al-Hajjaj was appointed as the governor of Kufa during the time of the Umayyad Caliph, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. And he was known for his hatred and his animosity towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. It was very, very clearly known. He has a story of how he was raised and the way he was raised and how that affected his attitude and belief. So this person who refused to be on the side of the Ahlul Bayt years earlier, he comes to Al-Hajjaj in order to pledge his allegiance to him because he's the new governor. And even though Al-Hajjaj was a staunch opponent of the Ahlul Bayt, they say that many of the opponents of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and this is something which was they attributed to Muawiyah, that they say that there are types of people that their merit is known with their followers, but their merit is more well known with their enemies. And so the Ahlul Bayt were those type of people that their merit was more well known with their enemies than it was with sometimes some of their followers. And so this man comes to pledge allegiance to Al-Hajjaj, and Al-Hajjaj recognizes him. And he says, I'm here to pledge allegiance to you and to the Caliph. And so Al-Hajjaj says, are you the one that decided not to pledge allegiance to the Ahlul Bayt? He says, yes, I was in that position. He said, why? And when he enters the palace in order to pledge allegiance, Al-Hajjaj is eating. He's busy eating with his hands. So he says, why? He says, well, I was kind of busy and whatnot, and he starts to make an excuse. And so, he says, my hands were tied. I was kind of busy. And so the Khalifa says, well, in that case, my hands are tied right now, and he offers his leg. He says, here, shake my leg. He says, you, the one that doesn't know, that's on the fence, that cannot make a decision to be on the side of Ahlul Bayt, now you're coming to me? So he was able to recognize that irony that existed. So going back to that concept of personal liberation, of personal freedom, and at least taking a stance, at least standing for something. So there are 4 principles that this author talks about. He says principle number 1, and what he talks about when it comes to freedom and liberation is that, when you practice some of these principles, you begin to build safety, and when you build safety, you earn people's trust. So think about it from a perspective of running an organization, like a masjid or an Islamic school. That you truly, to become successful and to move forward, you need to earn people's trust and build safety. So number 1, he says, be impeccable with your word. We talked about this the other night, how important the word is. How your word either has creative power or it has destructive power. You can either build people with your words, or you can destroy people with your words. So knowing how to use words are very important. And sometimes, if you think about it, if you think about the times in your life where you experienced the most pain, if you do a general audit of that, most of the pain that you experienced probably was not or did not have anything to do with physical pain. A lot of it probably stemmed from emotional pain, because somebody either said something or did not say something. The person that did not show or say to his children that he loved them, or the mother, or the spouse or the partner that did not say it enough. So a lot of it comes from our words, either the creative power or the destructive power. And he talks about, number 1, is be impeccable with your word. When you give somebody your word, follow through with that. Be genuine. Exercise personal integrity. When you make a promise, keep a promise. Understand that your words, they also create your reality. And that's why the Quran says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. O you who believe, reverence your Lord, and say that which is sadid. Don't engage in words or speech or dialogue that's meaningless. قُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. So make sure that you're saying that which is best. Make sure that when you talk to yourself, and most of us, we do have this habit of talking to yourself, say what is best. Don't put yourself down. Don't destroy yourself by your own words. So we talked about that the other day. Number 1 is be impeccable with your word. Number 2, he says, don't take anything personally. Nothing. And a lot of us are, the biggest thing that's holding us back, and the biggest shackle that's holding us back internally, is that we take things personally. He says that if you don't take things personally, and you start to develop immunity from people's opinions, you save yourself from a lot of needless suffering. Think about it. Because we take things personally, and he gives an example. He says, if you're walking down the street and someone looks to you and says, you're ugly, he says you have 2 choices. Either you could be offended by taking that personally, or not offended by not taking it personally. And he says something that sometimes we fail to forget, or sometimes we don't think about, is that when people are mean or nasty or abusive to us, it's usually because there's something lacking on the inside. On their inside, not your inside. He says, if you believe it, that means that something's lacking on your inside. But he says that usually when people say nastiness or do nastiness, it's because they're projecting something that's missing on the inside. And that's why when you find people who are at peace with themselves, they have nothing but good to say. They can't find evil to say about anyone, because they're at peace with themselves. So he says, when you consider that, understand that, look, man, people have issues. People are going through stuff. And sometimes people just want to vent. Sometimes people want to want to throw out nastiness. I don't know if I mentioned this story the other day, but it was a personal story, and I was driving one time, and I found there was a car parked in the middle of the road, and it was going to make a left turn with the emergency lights on. And so I had a little bit of time before getting to my destination. I wasn't in a rush, so it was a very, very busy intersection. So I parked the car, I got out, I saw a lady and her daughter, and I said, you know, maybe they need help. So just to make sure that they're doing okay and that they can call AAA or a tow truck to come and help them, and to push their car if it needed to be pushed. And as I was standing there, not in the middle of the road, you know, within the lane, a driver came by, and as he passed, he honked his horn, and he said, you know, he shouted from the bottom of his lungs, "Get out of the middle of the road." And so I thought to myself, I said, not only is this person not stopping to help, I mean, the least you can do is stop to help. Not only is this person himself not stopping to help, knowing that the car needs to be pushed, but he felt the need to shout an expletive and to say, "Get out of the middle of the road." And I thought to myself, I said, I could have taken that personally. You know, his car came very, very close. But I thought to myself, maybe this person is suffering on the inside. And maybe that's their way of projecting what's going on the inside. So sometimes we don't realize that a lot of people, they're just very, very painful on the inside. They're feeling a lot of pain. And sometimes you need to rise above that. So he says that's one way of releasing the shackles, is never take anything personally. What he also adds to that is that people who take things personally, he talks about a concept called personal importance. That's when you think that everything in the world has to do with you, and that you're very special, and that you're very significant, and the entire world revolves around you. When you realize that the world is not about you, the world does not revolve around you, the world doesn't owe you anything, nobody is going to hand you anything, you stop taking things so personally. So it's interesting because he says that this is, you know, it's a form of selfishness that we actually develop when we think everything is about us. And you've seen it where people, you know, come to a gathering and one thing is off, you know, one light bulb is out, and you know they take it personally, or they hear something from the minbar or from the podium and they take it very personally. Brothers and sisters, we need to learn how to learn as well. We need to learn how to become students. I'll tell you, some of the greatest organizations that you go to, I've noticed, and because of the ability to travel and see certain things, you know, when you go to mega churches, or if you've ever seen a sermon at a mega church, you know, the churches that have 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000 people. There's one thing that's outstanding about people that are sitting in the audience and in the front row. Have you noticed? Not that they're nodding their head, because we also nod our head. But most of them have notebooks and pens in their hands. They treat the education that they receive at the religious institution as seriously as they treat the education they receive at an academic institution. Because we know that at an academic institution, if you take notes and if you study and if you do well, you're going to get a piece of paper that's going to pay you $80,000, $90,000, $120,000 a year. But what about the education that you receive at the religious institution? And this means that educators must also heighten the standard of what they're saying, so it's a mutual relationship. So selfishness, he says that when you think that everything is about, so what I say is that, listen, if you're listening to a lecture, use the grocery store method. When you go to the grocery store, you don't put everything in the basket, unless it's Ramadan, and you notice when you go in Ramadan, when you're fasting, and you go an hour before iftar, you buy every single thing, and you eat none of it. The grocery store method says, pick what you need, have a grocery list, pick what you need, put behind what you don't need. If you don't need the cereal that's full of sugar, but keep it there. You don't need it. If you don't need the bacon, don't take it. So when you're listening and when you're learning, pick what you need and leave behind what you don't need, so that you don't take anything personally. So this is principle number 2. Principle number 3, and this is related to number 2, is don't make assumptions. Never assume anything. I had a 6th grade teacher. He said what assuming does is it makes a I won't say it from the minbar, but the first 3 letters out of you and me. So don't assume, because assuming makes you look like a fool. Instead, he says, learn to inquire, ask questions, and communicate. I'll give you a story. There's a gentleman who one time gave a talk about how he was able to build confidence. He says that when I was young, I was very, very shy, and he comes from a background, a culture, an ethnicity which encourages people to be shy, to look down, to only talk to when you're spoken to answer when you're spoken to. And he says, so I kind of had this inferiority complex when I came to the United States, and I didn't have a good self-image, I didn't have confidence. But he says, you know, one day I decided that I'm going to make a switch. He said, I decided that whenever I would face a rejection, the way that I would build my confidence is to ask the question, why? So if I'm, for instance, selling something, and someone says, no, I'm not interested, I'd ask him, well, why aren't you interested? Is it because you already have a product, or is it because this, or is it because my bad breath? What is it? What is it that makes you not interested? He says, once I started asking why, he said, number one, it begins to reveal certain things. So you stop taking things personally, because you know that it's not about you. He says, I started asking why, and he said it started revealing certain things. So he said that I began experimenting with this concept. He said, I started putting myself in situations where I know I was going to get rejection, and that I would take it one step further and ask why. Why did you reject me, or why do you say no? So he says, I realized that, look, most people, it's not a personal grudge that they have with you when rejection comes your way. He gives an example. He says that one day I made it an experiment, and I mean, he would put himself in really awkward situations to make sure that he would get rejected. He says, what I did one time was walk around a neighborhood, and I carried some plants with me, and I would knock on people's doors of their homes, and when they would open, I would ask them if I can plant these plants in their backyard. So, I mean, imagine how awkward that situation is. So he says, I went to a door, knocked on the door, the person opened up the door, I said, hello, can I introduce himself? He said, and he's not telling them that he's doing it for experimental purposes, but he said, can I plant these plants in your backyard? And the person said, no. So he said, instead of taking that rejection personally and assuming maybe it's because I'm from a different background or whatever, he said, I asked him why. So the person said, I'm afraid that if you plant them in my backyard, the person said, I have a pet, a dog that digs everything up. So if you put them in my backyard, it's going to be useless. But he said, the person across the street loves plants. So go to their house, knock the door, and propose to them. And he did, and they let him plant the plants in the backyard. All because he asked the question why instead of assuming. So sometimes, again, I mentioned this the other night, is the issue is that we need to learn to communicate certain things. So if someone is passionate about something, don't shut them down. If your children are interested in something, don't shut them down. Ask them why. Ask them why the thing that they are interested in is significant to them. And when you build safety in that regard, you'll realize how much more passion and dedication and confidence you will begin to build in other people. See, the other night we talked about how great leaders, they communicate their why. They know exactly what's going on because they have a platform. Martin Luther King had a big why, but he also had a platform when he went to the, the memorial or the National Mall, and millions of people got together because there was a platform. People wanted to listen to what he said. So he said, never assume anything. Don't make any assumptions. Ask people why. Communicate. And number 4, he said, always do your best. Whenever you're working on anything, always do your best. Now, what does that mean? Some people assume that doing your best means putting more time. Now, time is an important factor in doing your best, but time is not everything. Some people assume that, doing the best in the gym is putting in more time. Have you noticed sometimes the people that have been consistently going to the gym and they're effective and they're in and out within 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And they get more work done than the person that's there for 2 or 3 hours who's on the phone and has the Starbucks latte in their hand and they're talking to everyone and they have no idea how to use any of the machines. And Because it's not the amount of time that you put in, it's how effective are you. So really doing the best and making sure that you're giving every area of your life the percentage that is due. You know, I was asked by a professor one time, she said that look at the different areas of your life and draw it on a pie chart and think of it as an in and out investment. When you're investing right now financially, if you're investing in a stock or a bond or a mutual fund or whatever, naturally you look at what is going to give you the biggest return on your investment. Look at those areas in your life that you're giving time, but they're not giving you a proper return on your investment. And based on that, do a personal audit. I have a personal story that I like to share, and I shared this with my community back home, and I learned this lesson in a certain way. And a few years ago, I was living in an overseas country, and the home that I was living in, it had a front yard. And in that front yard, there was areas to plant trees and plants and whatnot. And out of all of the trees and plants that were planted there, from the time that I arrived to the time that I left, within that 6-7 year period of time, there was a fig tree. And this fig tree lasted more than any other tree. Everything else I would plant would kind of last. It could not take the heat of the sun. And it would die sometimes within a year, sometimes within 2 years, except for this fig tree. It was resilient. The problem, though, with this fig tree is that it never produced any figs. And if it produced figs, they were big on the outside, but they were white on the inside. They're just dry. There was nothing there. And so I tried everything with this tree. I tried giving it water and attention and love. Because, I started to get opinions. When things don't work, it's like when you get sick and people start giving you opinions. And none of those opinions work, by the way. Some people tell you do this, some people tell you do that. Some people tell you have to eat 6 times a day, some people tell you have to eat 1 time a day, and none of it ever works. So people started giving opinions. Give it a lot of water, don't give it any water, prune it, do this, do that, change the soil, give it. So I tried everything, and it was being very, very, passive-aggressive, to say the least. To be very kind. And I was getting very frustrated myself. Until one day I left for about 3 weeks. I went to ziyarah, came back, and I saw these big, juicy figs waiting there. So I picked them, and they were delicious. So I was excited. I thought, you know what? I'm going to keep this. I figured out the secret, and it's going to continue to give. Next year it didn't give. The year after that it didn't give, and the year after that it didn't give. Now, there was another area that I didn't pay a lot of attention to, and I left. And while I left, there was a gentleman who would take care of the home, and we would talk, and every time we would speak on the phone, he would say, the tree is getting big, the tree is getting big, the tree is getting big, building all of this excitement, because I thought that he was talking about this fig tree that I had waited so many years for it to blossom and do its thing and provide shade. And so a few years later, I went back, opened the door. The fig tree had barely grown, again, no figs, but I looked to my right, and where there was no tree when I left, this brand new tree that was about 12 to 15 feet tall had sprung. And I looked at that tree, and I thought to myself, I said, I paid no attention to this side of the garden at all. I gave all of my energy for this godforsaken tree over here, and it barely gave me what I wanted. Where this area that I only gave 5% gave me a tree that's 12, 15 feet tall, and it's covering the entire yard. And so I took a picture of that tree, and I started to think to myself, I said, what are the areas in my life and other people's lives that you give 100% energy, but it only gives you a 5% yield? Sometimes they're toxic relationships. Sometimes it's nonsense, things that we do on a daily basis that's absolute nonsense. It's not going to give you anything, not for your dunya and not for your akhirah. And what are the areas that if you give 5% more and you do your best, you truly do your best, it will give you a bigger reward? So those are the 4 principles that he talks about. And he says that when you operate from those 4 principles, internally you feel liberated. You begin to feel liberated. And imagine if we were to apply those principles in our house of worship, our communal house of worship, how liberated we would feel. The sense of freedom. And by the way, with liberty and freedom comes safety. You realize that when you are in a place that's liberated and free, you feel safe. So our job is to create a safe space. The only way that leadership will blossom in our communities, within our youth, is to create a safe space. These are the nights that we remember the family members of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And yesterday we remembered the musibah of Ali al-Akbar, the dear son of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Today we are remembering the musibah of Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan. And truly the musibah of Al-Qasim begins from the days of his father. Al-Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba salawatullah wa salamu alayhi was a man of integrity. He was a man of patience. He was a man of love and loyalty. He was a man who experienced so much resistance, so much oppression, even from his own companions. One of the companions, because he was taken away by the heat of the moment, when Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam had to back down and when he had to establish the treaty with Muawiyah, one of the companions, imagine, he comes to Al-Imam al-Hasan, he says that I wish before that day happened, I wish that you would have died and all of us would have died, so that none of us would have to experience this day. And this was a close companion of the Imam, not someone who's from the other side. So Al-Imam al-Hasan experienced all types of oppression, all types of resistance. And what he wanted most in his life, to honor the tradition of his father, to honor the tradition of his grandfather, and to leave behind a path for his brother Al-Hussein. And what was so hard on the heart of Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam was that he knew what kind of world he was leaving behind for Hussein. And this is why, brothers and sisters, that when Al-Imam al-Hasan, when he was poisoned from within his home, and narrations tell us that the poison was so strong in its effect, it was so severe in its effect, that he became so sick, he fell so ill that he could not consume anything. He could not consume any food. He could not consume any water. Everything that he would consume would come out, and he would vomit blood constantly. And he felt the heat of that poison within his body. And narrations tell us that every time that one of his family members would come in, every time Al-Hussein would come in, every time Zainab alayhi salam would come in, he would try to hide, he would try to appear that he was in better strength, because he did not want to increase the calamity on them. After they had seen all of the masa'ib, Masa'ib, Zainab alayhi salam, she had seen the passing of her grandfather, she had seen the passing of her father, she had seen the passing of her mother, she had seen the passing, she was now witnessing the passing of Al-Imam al-Hasan, and she was about to witness the biggest calamity of it all, and that was the passing and the martyrdom of Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was there on the bedside by his brother Al-Hasan. He would tend to his wound, he would attempt to care for him, he would attempt to revive him, he would give him his love, he would give him his care. And narrations tell us that Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam would turn to his brother and he would say the following to him. He said, La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. He says, there is no day like your day, O Aba Abdullah. There is nothing that you see and you witness today that compares with what you will have to go through, with the tragedy that will befall you and everyone after me. And so, for 10 years, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, lived without his brother, without his mentor, without his friend, without his support, without the man that he spent his entire life in the shadow of, respecting and honoring and loving and supporting every time he needed him. But Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam left behind, some narrations say 4 sons, some narrations say 5 sons, all of them that were present on the day of Ashura. All of them that had gone out into the battlefield on the day of Ashura. And the only one that survived was one son that was injured on the day of Ashura, and he was presumed dead. However, he was healed, he was brought back to Medina, and from that single son that survived, the entire nasl, the entire lineage of Al-Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba comes from that one son that was injured but survived. Or else Al-Imam al-Hasan would have no lineage had it not been for that one son. And so we talk about the pride and the jewel of the family of Al-Imam al-Hasan, and that is Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan, the eldest. The one that on the day of Ashura, as he saw his cousins, as he saw his brothers, as he saw his relatives, as he saw his companions one by one going to the battlefield, as he saw the calamities increase on his uncle Al-Hussein alayhi salam. He went to his uncle and he asked for permission to go out into the battlefield. Al-Hussein alayhi salam, although he had sent out Ali al-Akbar, but now he is looking to his son Al-Qasim. He says, "Oh Qasim, my dear Qasim, anta wadi'atu akhi al-Hasan." He says, "You were a trust. You were our trust, someone that we were whose life we were entrusted with by my brother Al-Hasan. If you go out into the battlefield, who is going to remind me of my brother? Who is going to remind me of my friend?" So he turned him away. Al-Qasim narrations say that he, at that moment, that pivotal moment, he remembered that there was a letter that was written. And so he retrieved that letter, he opened that letter, he took that letter to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That letter was written with the handwriting of Al-Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam. It said, "Bunayya Qasim, my dear son Qasim, إذا اشتدت عليك الأمور فعليك بنصرة عمك الحسين." He says that one day you will find yourself in calamity and in hardship. When you find yourself in that situation, it is your obligation to come to the rescue of your uncle Hussein. When Hussein alayhi salam saw those words, when he saw that command, he broke down into tears. He knew what was to be done. So he turned to Al-Qasim alayhi salam. He said to him, "O Qasim, what is your perception on death? How do you view death?" He said to him, "Wallah ya am fi nusratikum ahla min al-asali." He says, "If it is in your defense, then death to me is sweeter than honey." They embraced one another and they broke into tears until they fell onto the floor. When they woke up, they got up, they stood up. Imam al-Hussein wanted to prepare him, so he turned to Zainab alayha salam. He says to her, "Ukhayya Zainab, itini bi'imamati akhi al-Hasan." He says, "Oh Zainab, bring for me the turban of my brother al-Hasan. Bring for me the sword and the armor of my brother al-Hasan." He takes that turban. Narrations say that also when Al-Qasim went into the battlefield, one of his brothers also went out into the battlefield. So Al-Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he took the turban, the cloth, he tore it into half, and then he tore those halves into half. He took one part of that cloth and he wrapped it around the torso of the younger brother. Since he was too small, the armor was dragging, so in order to keep it up, he wrapped the cloth around his torso like a belt. He wrapped a turban and he placed it on the head of Al-Qasim and he sent him out into the battlefield. When Al-Qasim went out into the battlefield, people instantaneously recognized him that this is the son of Al-Hasan. But for those who did not recognize, he began to recite the poetry. He said, "In tunkiruni fa'ana najlu al-Hasan." If you do not know me, for I am the son of Al-Hasan. Sibtun Nabi al-Mustafa wal-Mu'taman. He says, I am the grandson of the chosen one and the trusted one. هذا حسين كالأسير المرتهن بين أناس لاصقوا صوب المزن. He says, do you not see that this is my uncle Hussein, taken as a captive, taken as a prisoner? He went out into the battlefield. He began to fight ferociously. With the ferocity of Banu Hashim, he began to strike, despite his young age, the enemies down one by one, until finally, narration says that the strap on one of his sandals, because he was running, the strap on one of his sandals, it snapped, it came undone. As he bent down to fix his sandals, one of the enemy army took advantage of that situation. He came to Al-Qasim and he struck him on his head with the sword. Al-Qasim fell down. The blood began to gush everywhere. He could not see what was going on. At that moment, Imam Hussein alayhi salam began to head towards the battlefield. Al-Qasim said, "Assalamu alayka ya Amma. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Alayka minni salam." At that moment, Imam Hussein responded to him. He said, "Bunayya Qasim, ya'uzzu Allah ala ammik, an tad'uh fala yujibuk, aw yujibuka fala yu'inuk. He says, it is tough for your uncle to hear your cries, but he cannot come to you. And if he comes to you, he cannot come to your aid. And if he comes to your aid, it will not help you. بعدا والله لقوم قتلوك وخصمهم يوم القيامة جدك وأبوك. He says, do not fret and do not worry, O Qasim, for the people that stand against you, their enemy on the day of judgment will be your grandfather. It will be your father. The body of Al-Qasim was taken back to the camp of Imam Hussein. It was taken back to the tent where the shuhada were buried. Imam Hussein alayhi salam places the body of Al-Qasim next to Ali al-Akbar, and narrations tell us that he laid between both of the bodies. One time he would look to Ali al-Akbar, one time he would look to Qasim. He would turn back to Ali al-Akbar and turn back to Qasim and weep. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد.